In this video, I am going to show you how to select and manipulate elements in JavaScript. Elements are the building blocks of any web page, and JavaScript allows us to access and modify them using various methods and properties. We can use JavaScript to change the content, style, attributes, and events of elements, as well as create new elements and append them to the document. In this video, we will learn how to use some of the most common and useful methods and properties for selecting and manipulating elements, such as document.getElement by id, document.querySelector, element.innerHTML, element.style, element.setAttribute, and element.addEventListener. I will also show you some code examples and demonstrate how they work in the browser. Now the first thing that we need to do before manipulating the element is to select it. There are many ways to select elements in JavaScript, but the two most popular and widely used supported methods are document.getElement by id and document.querySelector. Now this document.getElement by id takes an id attribute value as a parameter and returns the element with that ID. For example, here you can see we have an element which is h1 with the ID attribute, and the ID of this h1 is title. Now to select this element in our JavaScript file, we can write let title is equal to document dot get element by id, and here we can write the id name which is title, like this. Now if we log this title variable, you can see we are getting null. It is because here I am using this script tag in our head element. Now to make this work, we need to use this at the end of our body element right here. Now if I hit save, you can see in our console we have our heading element with the text welcome to Code Geek Universe, and this is the same element that we have here in our HTML file, and we are selecting this by using this dot get element by id method, and here we are logging this in our console. So this is the one way of selecting our element. Now we have this variable title that references the h1 element, and we can manipulate it as we want. After this, the second way of selecting element is by using document.querySelector, which takes a CSS selector as a parameter and returns the first element that matches the selector. For example, here you can see in our HTML file we have an element with the class name of intro. Now to select this paragraph element with the class of intro, by using document.querySelector, we can write here let para is equal to document.querySelector. Then after calling this, in these parentheses, we can write the name of the class, which is intro. I am just copying this class name. Now to write this, we also need to use dot, and after entering period sign, we can write the class name, which is intro. Now if we log this para variable in our console, now you can see we have our paragraph element that we selected here by using query selector. Now we can also select element which have an ID attribute using this same method, which is query selector. Now let's say this paragraph element has also an ID of para. In order to select this, by using this query selector, we can simply write here instead of dot intro, we can write our hash symbol, which is for ID attribute, and then the name of the ID is para. After hitting save, you can see just like before, we have our paragraph element. So by using this selector, we can select element which have an ID or class attribute. But this get element by ID method only take ID attribute to select an element. And now we have a variable called para that references to our p element and we can manipulate it as we want. Note that document.querySelector only returns the first matching element. If we want to select all elements that match our selector, we can use document.querySelectorAll, which returns a node list object that we can loop through or access by index. Now let's say we have two paragraph elements with this same class name of intro. Now to select both of these elements, we can write let all para is equal to document dot query selector all. Then here we are going to use its class name which is intro, and after hitting save, if we log the value of this all para, you can see now we have an array of two elements. The first one is this paragraph and the second one is this one. So basically this query selector all method gives us an array of those elements that has a class of intro. So this is the way through which we can select multiple elements using this query selector all method. And this query selector method is only used to select a one element. Now after selecting an element, we can manipulate it using various methods and properties. And one of the most common and useful property is element.innerHTML, which allow us to get or set the HTML content of an element. For example, if we want to change the text of this h1 element to hello JavaScript, we can write title, which is this heading element. We can change its inner HTML property and we will set this equal to hello JavaScript like this. Now if I hit save, you can see now the text content of our heading element is changed to hello JavaScript. Before you can see here, we have welcome to Code Geek Universe. So to change the content of any element, we can use this inner HTML property. Now another common and useful property is element.style, which allow us to get or set the CSS style of an element. For example, if we want to change the color or font size of this heading element, we can write title, which is this one, and then on this title we can say style, then the property name that we want to change. In our case we want to change the color, so we can write color, and then using our assignment operator, now the value for this color I am setting it to red. Now we have our heading in red color. Now to increase or decrease the size of this heading, we can write title dot style. Now the property name is font size. Now I am changing its font size to 50 pixels. If I hit save, you can see the updated style in our browser. By using this style property, we can add any CSS style that we want. Now another common and useful method is element.setAttribute, which allow us to get or set the value of an attribute of an element. For example, if we want to add class attribute to this h1 element using JavaScript, now before adding this class attribute, I just want to show you in our console that this element don't have any class attribute. This element have ID attribute and style attribute. Now to add class attribute using JavaScript, we can write title dot set attribute, and then in these parentheses, this function take two arguments. First one is the name of the attribute, which is class attribute, and then comma, and here for this class name I am using heading. Now if I hit save, and if we take a look in our console, now we have this class of heading in our h1 element. So by using this set attribute, we can add any attribute to our elements using JavaScript. Now at last, another common and useful method is element.addEventListener, which allow us to add an event listener to an element. An event listener is a function that runs when a certain event occurs, such as a click, a mouse over, or a key press. Now here for example, in our HTML file, you can see we have this button element. And if we want to make this paragraph disappear, when we click on this button element, first we need to select this button element, which we can do by using our query selector. So let button is equal to document dot query selector, and then here we are going to use the tag name, which is button, like this. Now on this button element, we are going to use our event listener. So when we will click on this button, this paragraph will become disappear from our browser. Now after selecting this button element, we can write button dot add event listener. Now here this add event listener method takes two arguments. First one is the name of the event and second is the function. So here we want to listen on click event. So the first argument is click. So I am selecting this click event. Now for this second argument, we need to add a function. Now in this function, we are going to define what will happen when we click this button. So we want to hide this paragraph element when someone click on this button. Now in order to do this, we can write para dot style dot opacity is equal to 0. Now if I hit save and if we click on this button, and now you can see our paragraph element is now hidden. And this is how we can add an event listener to our button element using this add event listener method. And these are some of the most common and useful methods and properties for selecting and manipulating elements in JavaScript. But there are many more that you can explore and experiment with. You can find the full list of methods and properties for elements on the MDN Web Docs website. Now in this video, we learned how to select and manipulate elements in JavaScript using various methods and properties. We saw how to use document.getElement by ID and document.querySelector to select elements by ID and CSS selector respectively. We also saw how to use element.innerHTML, element.style, element.setAttribute, and element.addEventListener. We also saw some code examples and demonstrated how they work in the browser. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more videos like this. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video.